On today's Locked On NBA, Bulls get a game-winning shot. Payback versus the Atlanta Hawks. Also, got to break down what happened in the Brooklyn versus Golden State game. Is Brooklyn for real? Is Golden State not? And then finally, Bucks Cavs battle at the top. All that and more in today's episode of Locked On NBA. Let's go.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Locked On NBA. I'm Pat the Designer, sitting in for Nick yet again. How do I keep getting this job? That's what they keep asking me. Don't worry about it. Host of Locked On Bulls. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. We've got a great episode coming up today, and I am joined by host of Locked On Lakers, Andy Kamenetzky. Andy, what's going on, brother?
Am I technically sitting in for you while you're sitting in for Nick?
You know, there's just been this instant rotation of white guys, and then they just throw Hayes in there every now and then. That's pretty much what it's been.
As I like to say, we all look alike.
Hey, listen, the NBA did not look alike tonight. That was a great segue, by the way. Don't worry about that. The NBA did not look alike tonight as we had games all over the place, blowouts left and right. But first game that we got to get into, man, Bulls versus Hawks. Of course, me being Locked On Bulls, I was paying very close attention to this game, but I thought that it was a really interesting game because as I said over on the podcast today, we saw the Bulls finally play an offense for 78% of that game. Now, it worked out in the end, but there were moments where we were looking around at DeMar DeRozan and saying, hey, a lot of one-on-one could cause some issues. I thought that the Bulls did a good job defensively for the most part. Trae Young did get going in the first half, going off against Alex Caruso, but then Hayo Dosunmu got switched on him in the second half, and 5 points in the second half of that game in a first half where he scored 29. Really good defense from Hayo. He's done a really good job against him. Outside looking in, Andy, how is your viewpoint on what we're seeing from this Bulls team right now, right? Like they have the big blow up. They're fighting in the locker room. Everybody seems to hate each other per every report. And then they go on a 2-game win streak.
Well, I think it's not just interesting in this game, Pat, that the Bulls ended up winning. It's the idea that you had efficient nights from all three of your stars. You know, yes. DeMar DeRozan has 28 points, 12 of 23 from the field. Zach LaVine, 22 points, 8 of 16 from the field. Nikola Vucevic, 20 points, 8 of 17. Like all of them playing well off each other, seeming to find the shots between each other. You know, there was the report from Shams and the great Darnell Mayberry with The Athletic about, you know, DeRozan and LaVine having a good personal relationship and even enjoying working with each other. Yeah. But they can't really find a rhythm together. And then you combine that with the issues between reportedly LaVine and the Bulls front office. And, you know, all of a sudden you start wondering like, okay, is this the type of thing that pushes them apart or maybe even in the direction that guys on the team may want to go in? You know, it's not like DeMar DeRozan hasn't taken every single opportunity to remind you he thought he was going to be a Laker, wanted to be a Laker, you know, and things are going badly for the Bulls this year anyway. Yeah. So it's good to see them come together tonight and at least for a couple games. And, you know, maybe you wonder if nothing else, can they salvage this working relationship moving forward?
Yeah, 100%, right? Because it's a weird dynamic, right? Like you give up 150 points to the Timberwolves, and then all of a sudden you have this blow up. It gets out. And outside of the blow up, right? Like not only do the Bulls come out and win the next game, right? And they win in a pretty convincing fashion. But then Zach LaVine says after, right, basically calls Sham King Cap out. He's like, yeah, if I had said it, you would know about it from me, right? Like I've never hid anything from the media. And Casey Johnson kind of co-signing that, right? Zach LaVine's been a very open guy with the Chicago Bulls media. He's never, you know, hit his tongue. He said going into free agency next season, he intended to re-sign with the Chicago Bulls, said he never took any meetings with any other teams. But it always seems like, right, like the media kind of has an ability to, us being the media as well, right, has an ability to say basically, well, this is what the reports are. And everybody's like, oh, well, that must be the truth. But I've seen the kind of the opposite when Zach LaVine says, yeah, I don't know where these reports are coming from. It's not the truth. And
look,
everybody's like, I'm not buying it.
Well, I mean, look, there can be versions of truth in all of this.
Yeah.
Like Zach LaVine may be telling the truth when he's saying, in my eyes, this is not a blowout, or, me and DeMar DeRozan are not having issues, because in his mind, he's acknowledged they've talked before. Like, he's acknowledged that there have been conversations between him and DeMar. So he may view this stuff as not tension as much as we're looking to get on the same page. We're trying to be as good stylistically this year as we were last season. So that may be a truthful version of it. And then depending on whether you're getting, sources closer to DeRozan, or maybe even sources inside the locker room who they feel like it's tense between these two guys. You know what I mean? Like, because Shams and Darnell, like, for example, because I cited them earlier, those are both good reporters. And
a big name. They're not just throwing the names out there on anything that's not true.
Right, exactly. And, to be fair to DeMar and to Zach LaVine, like, I don't consider either one of those guys proverbial headaches either in the NBA. So, it could be one of those things where everybody's version of this is a little bit different, but it's pretty clear that it's not working on the court this year the way it was last year for whatever reason they or we want to lay out.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think the interesting thing is, right, like when we saw the Bulls have their most success, kind of was with DeMar by himself, right? Like, we didn't see a ton of that success when Zach came back into the lineup and started playing alongside DeMar, especially without Lonzo Ball there. So something to keep an eye on for sure on the Bulls side. I mean, I'm sure the Lakers are keeping a serious eye on it. I mean, here's the one thing that I do want to ask you while we've got you here, right? We have this conversation. Bulls are on a 2-game streak. It seems like, right, like winning solves everything. You keep winning, we're not having this conversation. But say it continues the way that we are. What are the Lakers realistically looking to give up for either Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan? Because AK is not looking to take back the 2027 first-round pick in the draft.
Well, I mean, if he's not interested in that, there's nothing to offer. I mean, the Lakers can't do anything. They only have total control right now in terms of assets of the 2027 and 2029 pick. Like, they have other draft picks down the line, but not that they have full control over, pick swaps, things like that.
Yeah.
So if he's not interested in that, there's nothing else to offer. So it's a short, like, it's not one of the things where the Lakers, their best offer and their worst offer are almost identical.
It's like, worst offer 2029 pick, best offer 27.
Well, I mean, look, if they could offer them both, but if say he's not interested in picks that far down the line, because they're hard to predict exactly what they're going to be worth.
Yeah,
there's nothing else. Like, that's it.
Tough. That's tough. It is a situation they're in. I mean, listen, hey, got a ring out of it. That's what I always say. Got a ring out of it. A bird in the hand worth 2 in the bush. I don't know. You know what I mean?
It's interesting though. I mean, that you say that, Pat, because obviously the trade that the Lakers made of Lonzo and Brandon Ingram and Josh Hart and all that draft capital for AD, you got a championship out of it. So that's always going to justify it. That being said, though, the LeBron era it's been underwhelming so far in terms of, I think, the overall expectations. I mean, a championship, they're hard to win, so I don't want to try to downplay the significance of it.
Yeah.
It's been underwhelming, though, in terms of what was expected, but it's also just been weird. It has been it's been everything from championship during the weirdest season in NBA history to struggling to make a play-in.
And it's been literally everything up and down out in LA. And hopefully, right, my team's not sending pieces back, because that means things are going terribly for me, which most of the season has been. Coming up, I do want to talk about the Atlanta Hawks a little bit, because they're on the losing side of this game, very much like the Chicago Bulls got beat by them a couple of weeks ago. But the DeJounte Murray, Trae Young situation has been very interesting this season. I want to pick your brain on that as well. But before we do that, do have to tell you about the NHTSA. Here's the thing. Did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell, your coworkers can tell, even your parents can tell. Everyone can tell. We all know that guy, right? It's like, oh no, I'm good, right? Like, maybe more air freshener. So what makes you think that law enforcement officers don't know when you're driving high? Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time, change your perceived time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not. Because the bottom line is, if you feel different, you drive different. And driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI. Paid for by the NHTSA. We want to thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. After this, there's the biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reaction, game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. Some of the great takes over there. Locked On Sports Today available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Andy. So we talked about the Bulls side of this, right? Everything that's going on with them. The Atlanta Hawks is such an interesting piece to this NBA season. They're still, right, they're in a playoff spot. They have some games where they play well, but does it feel like this team, they're right now 9th in the East, does it feel like this team is moving in the right direction, or you just got a couple of nice pieces on the team that are just playing together?
Well, I mean, this is obviously not what they expected when they gave up a lot for DeJounte Murray, and he's a really good player. Like, there were reasons to wonder if maybe that backcourt could be a little bit undersized in terms of some of the best teams that you would be looking to go against, especially defensively, because, you know, while Murray is a good defender, Trae Young always has to be papered over on that end of the court. Just
100%.
You know, both in terms of his overall size and at times I think his overall indifference. But it's always going to be something of a juggling act with that. But they gave up a lot hoping that this team could make good on the steps that they made a couple seasons ago. Mm. And, you know, you're hearing reports about Trae Young and Nate McMillan having conflict. And I know there are concerns that Trae Young is very difficult to coach, that he's difficult to play with. Yeah. And, you know, if you're going to be a heliocentric player like Trae Young is, you better be easy to play with, because it's one thing to monopolize the ball. And, you know, you want the ball in his hands a lot because he's really good, but it's another thing to monopolize the ball if you rub your teammates wrong. Like that can become a disaster for really talented, but not really going anywhere over the course of your career.
And it's weird, dude, because like you would think these guys would play well together, especially on the offensive end, right? Like you would think DeJounte Murray feeding it to Trae Young. That's the ideal situation. You want Trae shooting that ball anyway. That's what he does best. But we just haven't seen that play out this season. And the Hawks, when both of them are on the floor, again, pretty mediocre. They're 14-13 this season. Both of them have missed a couple of games here and there, right? Not much. The Hawks are sitting at 16-16 right now. But it just, when you watch it, it's just like, yeah, they play basketball. They're doing things on the court. Like I can see action happening, but it feels similar almost to the Bulls situation here, where it's very sometimes your turn, my turn. And that's just not an offense that seems like it's going to bring success in the modern NBA. You got to run some action. You got to get some things down low. And I said this about the Bulls, and as I watched the Hawks tonight with both of them on the floor, it's hilarious that it came down to a game winner, because like it kind of felt the same at times. Trae Young has the ability to shoot from so far back, but it really just felt like this is a older styled offense.
Yeah, it's also I mean, I'm not inside, Hawks culture or anything like that.
Yeah.
But this is Trae Young's team.
Yeah.
And DeJounte Murray was brought in part to be a balance to Trae Young, but it's still his team.
Yeah.
And DeJounte Murray isn't more established than Trae Young. You know what I mean? Like, so not that you want to see somebody try to like usurp part of the locker room or anything like that, but if there is a balance that needs to be laid out, it can be difficult to do that when you're both the new guy and you don't necessarily have certain credentials that you can lay out. Like the way like Jimmy Butler looked to do in Minnesota, or I would say even in Philadelphia, where it's like, I've done certain things you guys haven't done. Certainly it was that way in Minnesota, like where he had experienced winning that some of those other guys hadn't before. Like Kawhi Leonard when he went to the Clippers, there was a ton of tension, when he and Paul George arrived, because that had been like the Lou Will, Pat Beverly, Ivica Zubac, grinded out, and they were a fun surprise. But if you want to take it to the next level, assuming Kawhi's healthy, he's done things that all those other guys haven't done. Yeah. And as much as at times it seemed like they didn't like to admit it, they needed to get in line behind him, because it's obvious you need to get behind Kawhi Leonard if you're Patrick Beverly or Lou Williams. I don't know if it's as obvious you need to get behind DeJounte Murray or alongside DeJounte if you're Trae Young, like at least in his mind.
Yeah, Hawks is such an interesting situation, man. Listen over on Locked On Hawks to find out everything that's going on over there. I tuned in a little bit tonight. My favorite thing to do is like when my team actually, we haven't done it much, but the 12 times this year when my team's beating somebody, I do go listen and be like, hey, what are y'all saying about the Bulls right now? And it's usually just like, we lost to the Bulls. That's where we are right now. That's where we
Wow.
Hey, that's tough. It's hard to hear. I'm not going to lie to you. It's hard. It
sucks to be this is who we are opponent. Like when you lose, when you beat a team and the reaction is, well, this is who we are. We lost. It's like, wow, man.
The hard part is when they're like, and really, like, they didn't beat you. You shot yourself in the foot. And it's like, okay, dude, like, come on, like, give us a little credit. Like, we played some defense. Hey, we had another game happening tonight that I thought was wild. Now, listen, of course, right, no Stephen Curry. He's out dealing with the injury, right? No Klay Thompson. No DiVincenzo, no Andrew Wiggins. There's a lot of issues going on with the Golden State Warriors right now. But the routing that the Brooklyn Nets put on the Golden State Warriors tonight, 143-113, a 30-point win for the Brooklyn Nets. I got to ask you, Andy, is this Brooklyn team slowly becoming for real yet again? Are we really going to do this all over again, where we're watching this Brooklyn team, and no matter who they play night in and night out, they're going to be able to outscore?
Look, man, contextually with everything that we've been through with the Nets, like, I'm not sure I'm going to buy it, even if I see them raise the Larry O'Brien, like in June. I think there's a part of me that still isn't going to believe that it happened. But right now, man, they look like the team that everybody thought that they could be on paper. Yeah. If, they got out of their own way and Kyrie stopped doing Kyrie stuff, they look the part. And any team with KD playing well, you're always going to feel like you have a shot. Like, how insane would it be, by the way, if this team won it all, not just in the idea of everything that led up to it, but where do you go from there? Like, do you feel confident saying, all right, you know what, Kyrie, we're going to give you another long-term deal. We're gonna run this thing back long term. Like, I could easily imagine them winning a championship and KD being like, I still want out.
I don't disagree, but the weird part is, right, like, I feel like KD's finally got the dynamic that he wants. I think Kyrie, if anything, is probably the one that we see playing somewhere else, probably just because of how they went about. Right, not to say at any point that I agreed with pretty much anything Kyrie said, but how they went about trying to be like, okay, we're going to make you the martyr of this franchise. And it's like, hey, listen, I've watched you guys over the years too. You ain't exactly the next saint that we're going to be talking about. You know what I mean? So, but I just look at this team now, and for me, even if it does happen that somebody leaves, I think this is the kind of team that KD needed around him, right? A team that has some depth. Now, granted, right, versus a depleted Golden State Warriors team tonight, it looks a lot better. But I mean, this is the team we talked about. Royce O'Neal coming in, giving you 14 points. Nick Claxton, 10, 7, and 5. Joe Harris finally chipping in with 11 points. Ben Simmons basically just being the guy, like you said, let me facilitate, let me move around, right? Like, it finally feels like, hey, there's not just KD and Kyrie, or like it was last year, right? KD, Kyrie, and James. It feels like there's a team that's actually here and is starting to play a little bit more cohesive.
Yeah. There was a lot about them that on paper, again, if they could get out of their own way, made sense. And you mentioned Ben Simmons. He's been a massive wild card in this whole thing. And he got off to a really, really rough start that made it easy to be skeptical. But the guy has been a really good, if kind of unusual and sometimes difficult to figure out exactly how to use player. But there was a period where he was an elite passer and an elite defender. Yep. And those are two really valuable skills. And if anything, he could possibly make, we talked earlier about my turn, your turn. He could eliminate a lot of that between KD and Kyrie by just deciding whose turn it is, by, facilitating for both of them.
No, 100%. I think he's the interesting one, right? Because you almost have to, like, for me, when I'm thinking about Ben Simmons and where he's at right now, I literally am just like, I almost have to, like, tell myself, just don't pay attention to the fact that he's a $40 million a year player.
Yeah. Look, the contract is problematic in terms of a capped league, capped salary structure, and whether you're getting the most bang for your buck, the limitations it puts building other places. But at this point, with everything the Nets have been through, building this roster and the guys they've, traded for, had to trade out, whatever, at some point you just have to say it's a sunken cost. Are we getting value of any kind?
Yeah.
Because if we're getting value, that's the way I will admit I've been wrong on this so far with the Timberwolves. Yeah. The Timberwolves gave up a lot for Rudy Gobert. And I justified it, at least from my standpoint, in part because the Timberwolves, they don't get free agents. So Rudy Gobert was as legit a free agent equivalent as they were ever going to get. Yeah. But also I was like, look, he makes a lot of money and it'd be difficult for the Wolves to close with him and Cat. But if he can make the minutes that he plays, like the 30 minutes that he's out there, 33 minutes, really dynamic, and they play really well, okay, maybe he's not worth 40 million or whatever it is, 35 million, but he can be useful for you.
Yeah.
Like, at some point you have to look beyond just the salary slot.
It's hard, right? Because we live in such an age where we know everything. But when I watched that Nets game, I was like, listen, he's making plays. He's playing well defensively. Like, he's never he finessed, right? Shout out to you for getting the finesse. He's never going to be a 20-plus point per game guy, probably, in this NBA. I don't think we'll ever see that from him. He's just not very aggressive around the bucket, around the cup. He'll go up and dunk it for sure. He'll blow past you. He has the ability to. He just doesn't do it a lot. And he doesn't have to on that team. Like, you got KD, you got Kyrie. Now you got TJ Warren, who's starting to chip in a little bit, right? Like, you don't really have to on that team. And so it's a perfect situation for him.
Yeah, it is in theory. And look, it's for what it's worth. We're not that far removed from him averaging 3 seasons in a row around 17, 16 points.
Yeah.
That can get the job done, particularly when you've got KD and Kyrie on your team anyway.
If he gets back to 16 points a game, he's worth it.
With
everything else he brings, he's worth it. Like, I think that's the one part where you like every night when you're like, he looks great, 10 points. It's a lot of money for 10 points. And that's why you got to forget the contract, man. That's why you got to forget the contract. Hey, we got more coming up, man. We do want to talk about what is this Golden State Warriors team, and then get into Bucks and Cavs, the matchup of the Giants. And Kevin Love looks like he's putting on a little bit of weight, man. You going back to 2020, Kevin Love? I got a lot of questions. That's all I want to know. But first, got to tell you guys about Better Health. Here's the thing about Better Health, right? Like life, it does not have a manual. And so sometimes you're looking for, right? I know for me personally, I had a premature daughter, didn't know how to deal with that, didn't know what I was going through, would have loved to know about BetterHelp at that time, had no clue about it, right? But here's the thing. Life doesn't have a manual, but BetterHelp is as close as you can get to that manual. So when it's not working for you, it's kind of normal to feel stuck, right? Navigating any of life's challenges can make you feel unsure, whether it's a career change, new relationship, or becoming a new parent. Therapists that are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills, which make therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of the complex of that engine that is called you. BetterHelp has connected with over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient and accessible anywhere 100% of the time. I mean, as the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched, like I said, 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. Couldn't be simpler. No waiting room, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Hey, as we get back into this thing, man, we have some very interesting games to finish this out. Bucks Cavs is a great one to talk about, but still a little bit on the Golden State Warriors, right? Let's touch on them because dealing with some injuries right now, right? They don't look good. They are literally, I believe, still the worst NBA team on the road, which is almost mind-blowing.
Shout out considering the team I cover, man.
I mean,
it's the little things. It's the little things right now.
You got to take what you can get in the season like this right now, dog. It's mind blowing to say, right? Especially a team that has the talent, even without the starters on the floor, that it does, right? And me and Nick talked about this last week, right? We expected Jordan Poole to take this much bigger step. We expected, Kuminga to get used a little bit more. We expected Andrew Wiggins to do a little bit more, although he's out with some injury here, right? Like, what is this Golden State team to you? Is this a team that all of a sudden, right, we just got the faith they're going to get it together. By the playoffs, they'll be there. They'll be making a run. This will all be a forgotten thing. Or is this possibly who the Golden State Warriors are closer to being? Missing your main guys is going to affect you a lot.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, not having Steph is a massive deal. I mean,
it's huge.
He's the most important player on that team. He is as important to his team as any player is to their team. Yeah. But like I was thinking about this, Pat, just like last year, the Warriors not only won the championship, but they managed to seemingly find that really rare, elusive balance where you win now, but you're set up to win down the road. And I think because I know they surpassed my expectations heading into the season. I had a lot of concerns, like, we hadn't seen Clay play. Andrew Wiggins, his first season in Golden State was okay. Yeah. Like there was a lot. James Wiseman, we were still wondering what was going to be going on with him. And there were a lot of people, their expectations were surpassed. And it ended up such a great story. I think it became easy to forget about how many things just went perfectly well for them. Yeah. Like in ways where, Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody could look really exciting, in part because you didn't need them to be ready right away. James Wiseman didn't play at all, and it didn't matter. Somebody like Otto Porter Jr. managed to stay healthy for an entire season, which has unfortunately rarely happened for Porter. Like Klay Thompson came back and played well enough from, these really devastating injuries. And it was such a great story that he was back anyway. I think it became easy to overlook just how much had to break perfectly right and how hard it is to maintain things breaking perfectly right in consecutive seasons. There's just a lot to navigate. And this year it just seems like a lot is coming to a head for this team.
Now, you mentioned James Wiseman. I'll be honest with you, right? James Wiseman's been a conundrum for me this season because, like, hey, that's the piece that you guys needed, right? The big man that we've been talking about every time they go win a championship. And we're like, they're just one big man away, but they keep winning. You know that guy? Finally showing out a little bit. The young guy, right? Finally getting some tick. Second game playing above 20 minutes in over a while. Actually, at all this season, except for the first game of the season. And he had 36 and 2 on 12 of 14 shooting, 5 for 8 from the free throw line. Has James Wiseman been unlocked?
I need to see more. And I say this because everybody that I know who follows the Warriors or is a Warriors fan, they're not even close to convinced. Yeah. And, they're playing a Brooklyn team that does not have much, if anything, in the way of size. Like, I'm looking right now, actually, at the box score.
Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant's a big man.
they have one guy with a C next to his name. It's Nick Claxton.
Yep.
Like, everybody else is listed as either like a shooting guard or a small forward. Or there's like a couple guys who are listed as power forwards where you're being a little generous. Royce O'Neal, that's fudging it a bit.
No, we're definitely being generous there.
Yeah, I mean,
power forward's a little bit fudging it if we're being honest.
James, I did not see this game from start to finish, but James Wiseman coming off the bench, presumably is playing, against a lot of Nets bench players. The Nets bench players have one guy with the PF next to him, Markieff Morris. Like, that's it.
It gives him a little bit of an advantage for sure.
Yeah, and look, good for him.
I like building the confidence in the kid.
I was going to say he needs to find a comfort zone, so good for him.
Hey, speaking of big man, though, we did have a big man battle out in Cleveland, man. Cleveland going up against Milwaukee. 114-106 finish there. Cleveland continues to roll this season. I mean, going up against the Bucks, no Middleton in this game, but still, right? Like, you've got a lot of the big boys over there. And Milwaukee, and of course, Giannis, the biggest of all of them, right? And Cleveland didn't miss a beat. And we've seen this from Cleveland this season quite a bit. They have no trouble beating the top teams in this Eastern Conference. As they now sit third in the Eastern Conference, 22-11 on the season. Is this the Cleveland team that's actually going to get it done post-LeBron era? Like, is this the team, right? Do we actually have to talk about this team as a potential finals contender by the end of this season?
Yeah, I think we do. If you want to say it's premature to call them the front runner, that's fine. I mean, if nothing else, the Bucks are one season removed from winning a championship. The Celtics were just in the finals. They have way more collective experience. Yeah. Even Donovan Mitchell does not have a ton of really extended playoff runs, and he's never been to the finals.
Yeah.
So, other than Kevin Love, there's, off the top of my head, nobody in Cleveland who really matters in that rotation, who's got any been there, done that.
Yeah.
But they're talented, man. I mean, you can just see it. They're talented.
Cedi Osman's got a ring, doesn't he? Doesn't
I forgot.
Have a ring?
My apologies to Mr. Osman.
I disrespect Cedi Osman out here.
I am not looking.
That finals experience, man.
I would never look to intentionally disrespect Cedi over there in Cleveland, but like, they're talented, and they're a very, I think, unusual team to try to match up with because of that front court.
Yeah, they're so different, right? Like we talked about it before we started recording. That I find that they're like a really good married couple. I know that sounds weird, right? But it's like where Donovan Mitchell may lack at times, right? Sometimes he goes on stretches where he's a really inefficient player. He goes on a 1-for-6 shooting streak, right? Because he's putting so many of them up, taking deep shots. But in those times, legit, all season I've seen this, and it's the reason that I've been like, I have to change how I feel about this Cleveland team. Those are the times Darius Garland's like, oh, don't worry, I got you, bro. Yep, tall guys down there. There's like 7 of y'all. Tip that back. I got the ball now. Now I'm going to go knock down a shot. That's what this team to me has been all season. And I love the fact that, right, they're getting everybody involved in this. I think Donovan Mitchell, to me, is having one of his best seasons as an actual facilitator. Like that to me is the biggest thing. Donovan Mitchell, 36, 4, and 6 in this game tonight. 3 for 9 from the 3-point line. Playing a little bit of defense, got a couple of steals in this one, but it looks like the same Donovan Mitchell, but like also I'm willing to give the ball to my teammates. And I think that's such a big thing for him.
He's playing with a lot of guys that it seems like he trusts.
Yeah.
I think he also is coming out of an experience where he can downplay whatever personal beefs were there with him and Rudy Gobert, and maybe he's being transparent about this, maybe he's not, but it's clear he didn't believe in that team by the end of it. And it was pretty clear that team had run its course because they blew the thing up, and they're in the course, I imagine, by the trade deadline of blowing it up even further. But sometimes you realize from being an experience like that, like I have to expand my game more. And he may recognize like this opportunity I'm in right now is incredible. And I may not get a better one than this one. Yeah. So I might as well make the most of it, which means becoming a better version of myself. Also, really quick, I went and looked at Basketball Reference. Chetty Osman was only part of one finals run, 2018. They didn't win a championship.
That's the one they lost.
And in the playoffs, the man averaged 4.4 minutes per game. So I'm going, Pat, back to my original statement. Other than Kevin Love, like, come on.
Hey, here's the thing. It's like Brian Scalabrine said. 20 years, nobody will care. I'll tell him I was the MVP.
Well, that's fine. Look, Chetty Osman, I'm not saying he's a scrub. He can play. He's a solid rotation player.
That might have been his rookie year, actually. Yeah, that might have been his rookie year, actually, if I'm not mistaken.
It may have been. It may have actually been. But it was his rookie year. I'm looking right now. But
that was probably his rookie year. He's not getting a lot of run on a team with LeBron as a rookie. You got to be a monster.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, he's been to the finals. I'm sure he can, regale his teammates with stories of 2018 if they get that far. But they're going to be looking to Kevin Love for actual insights.
100%. And listen, we got to look at the other side as well, right? Before we get out of here, the Milwaukee Bucks still look like. Is there anybody in this league that can slow down Giannis? Like 45 points tonight. Literally, this game was not. I mean, I guess competitively it was close, right? But like, it was a game where you were looking at it and you were like, I hope Giannis doesn't wake up, and then he did, and. Anytime Giannis just flips the switch, I saw it in Chicago playing against the Bucks, right? Or maybe we might have been in Milwaukee, one or the other. But literally, you looked at it and it was like, oh, Giannis has 12 at the half. P. Will's doing a really good job on him. God, I hope he doesn't wake up. And then he did. And that's literally what we've seen from Giannis a ton this year. Didn't get a ton of help from a lot of these other guys on the team, but seeing how close this game is, right? Like, I still have Milwaukee as my finals pick to win this whole thing because, I mean, Drew Holiday had an off night tonight. Brooke Lopez had an uncommon night for him tonight, right? Like, Marjon Bishop played pretty well. Bobby Portis had an uncommon night for him tonight. These are names that when Chris Middleton has been out, have stepped up huge and have put up 15, 18 points. Bobby Portis coming off of the bench, giving you 20 points at times, 10 rebounds, right? Like, I still see this team as the deepest team in the Eastern Conference, especially when your starting point is Giannis.
Their big three plays off each other so well, and it's like a perfect balance of Holiday, pure backcourt, Middleton, swingman. Giannis is really whatever the hell he wants, but he operates like a big man. You know what I mean? Like there's just this perfect balance between the three of them. And, Brooke Lopez, Bobby Portis, Connaughton, it'll be really interesting to see how Joe Ingles, assuming he can stay healthy, how he fits into that mix. But just everybody buys into what they're supposed to be doing. Everybody is slotted well. Like Grayson Allen is slotted well into what he's supposed to be doing. That annoying bleep.
I get that.
He does what he's supposed to do.
he definitely fills that role very well because I know Bucks fans that can't stand him.
He's got a punchable face.
Hey, man, that's it for us on Locked On NBA today. For your second listen, make it Locked On Sports today. Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today podcast, available on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much for listening. Listen over to Andy over on Locked On Lakers. Hear about that riveting game versus the Kings. And you can hear about an exciting game winner on Locked On Bulls. Hey, Pat the Designer, back at it again. Y'all stay safe out there. Boom.
Cool.